A single step across a quiet river, and the world would never be the same. But tonight, we begin long before that step, before the armies, before the betrayal, before the name Julius Caesar echoed through history. Welcome to Drift to Sleep. I'm truly glad you're here. Wherever you are right now, whether you're listening beneath heavy blankets, in the soft glow of a bedside lamp, or in the quiet darkness of early morning, allow yourself to settle in. Let the rush of the day fall gently away. There is nowhere else you need to be. Before we drift back in time, tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from tonight. I always find it quietly amazing that while we travel into the ancient past, we're gathering here from every corner of the present, and if slow, immersive history helps you unwind and fall asleep, consider subscribing. This channel is a calm space for long-form storytelling, where history is not hurried, where moments are allowed to breathe, and where the past unfolds softly, like distant torchlight in the dark. Tonight, we journey to ancient Rome, to a republic trembling beneath ambition, to whispered alliances and silent rivalries, to a man whose choices would tilt the balance of power forever. This is the story of Julius Caesar. So dim the lights. Close your eyes if you'd like, and let us drift slowly into history. Night settled differently over ancient Rome than it does over modern cities. There were no engines, no distant electric hum, no glowing skyline pressing back the dark. Instead, there was torchlight, the crackle of oil lamps, the soft murmur of voices moving through stone corridors, and the heavy silence that followed once households closed their wooden doors against the uncertain streets. It was into this Rome, restless and proud, that Julius was born in the year 100 BCE, in the month of Quintilis, the month that centuries later would bear his name. The Republic was already old by then. Nearly 4 centuries had passed since the kings had been driven out. Rome governed itself through a senate, assemblies, magistrates, traditions layered so deeply that no single man was meant to rise too high above them. Yet the Republic was not peaceful. It was powerful, wealthy, and increasingly unstable. Julius was born into the gens. Julia, an ancient patrician family that claimed descent from Iulus, son of Aeneas, the Trojan hero. The claim was myth, but in Rome, myth was not dismissed. It was worn like inheritance. The Julii were noble, but by the time Julius arrived, they were not among the richest nor the most influential. Nobility without power is a quiet burden. It carries expectations without providing resources. His father, also named Gaius Julius Caesar, governed modest provinces and maintained respectable standing. His mother, Aurelia, was intelligent, disciplined, and formidable in a way that left a lasting impression on her son. Ancient writers would later remark that Aurelia shaped him profoundly. She instilled restraint where others saw indulgence, composure where others felt impulse. As a boy, Julius would have walked narrow Roman streets paved in worn stone, past vendors selling olives and bread, past veterans missing limbs from distant campaigns in Spain or North Africa, past senators carried in litters, and slaves hauling water from public fountains. Rome was a city of staggering inequality. Marble temples towered over cramped apartments. Triumphs marched past the hungry. He would have heard stories of conquest constantly. Rome was expanding. Legions moved outward each year, pushing boundaries, absorbing territories, bringing back wealth and captives. The Mediterranean was slowly becoming Mare Nostrum, our sea. But beneath this expansion lay tension. When Julius was still a child, the Republic was shaken by the reforms of Gaius Marius, a brilliant general who transformed the Roman army. Marius allowed landless citizens to enlist, promising them pay and land. This created professional soldiers whose loyalty increasingly belonged to their generals rather than to the Senate. This subtle shift would shape Julius's entire world. Marius was not just a distant political figure. He was family. Julius's Aunt Julia had married Marius. This connection would matter. Across the political divide stood Lucius Cornelius Sulla, aristocratic, calculating, relentless. Where Marius represented populist reform, Sulla embodied senatorial conservatism. Their rivalry escalated into civil war. Roman legions marched on Rome itself, an unthinkable act that shattered centuries of precedent. Imagine being a young boy in Rome during this time, hearing that Roman soldiers were fighting Roman soldiers, that generals were seizing the city by force, that names were posted in public squares. Lists of enemies of the state marked for execution. These were the prescriptions of Sulla. When Sulla ultimately triumphed in 82 BCE, he declared himself dictator and began systematically eliminating opponents. Property was confiscated, heads were displayed, fear seeped into the foundations of Rome. Julius was barely in his late teens. Because of his connection to Marius and his marriage to Cornelia, daughter of Cinna, another ally of Marius, Julius was marked as politically suspect. Sulla demanded that he divorce Cornelia. It was not merely personal, it was symbolic submission. Julius refused. It is one of the earliest recorded acts that reveals his character. He was young. He had little power. Refusing Sulla was dangerous, potentially suicidal. Yet he would not abandon his wife to appease a dictator. Sulla stripped him of his priesthood, confiscated his dowry, and listed him among those targeted. Julius went into hiding. Friends interceded. Influential relatives pleaded. Eventually, Sulla relented, reportedly remarking that in this young man there were many Mariuses. Even in youth, something about Julius unsettled those who understood ambition. Exile hardened him. He left Rome and served in Asia Minor as a military officer. There, away from the immediate political bloodshed of Rome, he began absorbing the rhythms of command. He observed discipline, logistics, the delicate balance between authority and inspiration. In 75 BCE, on his way to study rhetoric in Rhodes, Julius was captured by Cilician pirates off the coast of Asia Minor. The story has survived because it reveals something almost theatrical about him. The pirates demanded a ransom of 20 talents. Julius laughed and insisted they ask for 50, claiming he was worth far more. During his captivity, he behaved not as a prisoner, but as a superior. He recited poetry to them, criticized their taste, and told them repeatedly that once freed, he would return and crucify them. They treated it as a joke. When the ransom was paid and he was released, Julius did not simply resume his journey. He gathered ships, pursued the pirates, captured them, and ordered their crucifixion, though, in a gesture of what he considered mercy, he had their throats cut first to spare them prolonged suffering. Even in this episode, one sees the merging elements of his personality: audacity, theatrical confidence, calculated cruelty, and a strict sense of personal dignity. Rome during these years was restless but outwardly stable after Sulla's resignation and death. the Republic had resumed its constitutional shape, but the wounds were not healed. The precedent had been set. Legions could be used for personal power. Julius returned to Rome and began the slow ascent through the cursus honorum, the traditional sequence of public offices. He cultivated popularity carefully. He aligned himself with the populares, the political faction favouring reforms that benefited the common citizens, though in Rome these labels were fluid and often strategic rather than ideological. He served as military tribune, then quaestor. Each office brought visibility. He invested heavily in public games and spectacles, even plunging himself into debt to fund them. To a modern observer, this might seem reckless, but in Rome, public generosity translated into political capital. Debt, to Julius, was not a burden. It was leverage. As long as his influence expanded, creditors would wait. When his aunt Julia died, and later when his wife Cornelia passed, Julius delivered funeral orations that subtly displayed images of Marius, defying the lingering taboo imposed by Sulla's faction. It was a bold signal. He was not erasing his associations. He was resurrecting them. By his mid-30s, Julius had cultivated an image, aristocratic yet accessible, dignified yet ambitious, generous yet calculating. Rome itself was changing. The Mediterranean Empire brought enormous wealth, but also corruption. Governors enriched themselves in provinces. Senators competed ruthlessly. Elections were expensive and often violent. The urban poor were growing in number, and hovering above all was Pompey Magnus, Pompey the Great, a general of extraordinary success who had defeated pirates, expanded Roman territory in the east, and earned immense prestige. Another figure loomed as well, Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, whose suppression of the Spartacus slave revolt had restored internal order, but whose military reputation lagged behind Pompey's. Julius watched these men carefully. He was not yet their equal, but he understood something essential. Rome was no longer governed purely by institutions. It was governed by alliances between powerful individuals. The Republic's machinery still functioned, but it was increasingly hollow. As Julius rose through praetorship and eventually secured governorship in Hispania, he demonstrated both administrative skill and military competence. In Spain, he led successful campaigns, earning triumphal honors and solidifying his standing. It was during this period, according to tradition, that he encountered a statue of Alexander the Great in Gades. Standing before it, he reportedly wept, reflecting that Alexander had conquered much of the known world by the age Julius had already reached. Whether the story is literal or symbolic, it captures an internal restlessness. He did not measure himself against ordinary men. He measured himself against legends. By 60 BCE, Rome stood at a political impasse. Pompey sought land for his veterans. Crassus desired financial concessions for tax collectors. The Senate resisted both. Julius, shrewd and observant, recognized opportunity in stalemate. He proposed something unofficial yet transformative, a private alliance between the three most powerful men in Rome. History would call it the First Triumvirate. But at this moment, it was simply a quiet agreement, mutual support in elections and legislation, binding ambition to ambition. The Republic had not yet fallen, but it had begun a tilt, and Julius, patient and deliberate, was placing his weight upon it. The boy who had walked Rome's streets during proscriptions and civil terror was now stepping toward the center of power. He understood the fragility of institutions because he had watched them bleed. He understood fear because he had lived under it. He understood loyalty because he had tested it. Night deepens over Rome again. Torches flicker along the forum. Senators whisper in marble corridors. Soldiers polish armor in distant provinces. The Mediterranean wind brushes against stone temples that believe themselves eternal. Julius does not yet know the full shape of his destiny, but the Republic has already begun to revolve around him. And in the quiet spaces between speeches and strategy, between ambition and caution, history waits, patient, inevitable. The next chapter will follow his rise to consulship, the forging of the Triumvirate into political dominance, and the path that leads him toward Gaul, where Rome's borders and his own limits will be tested. Rome did not fall in a single night. It did not collapse with the crash of marble or the roar of a conquering army. It shifted quietly, gradually, like a structure whose foundation has begun to tilt so slowly that no one inside quite feels the angle changing. By the time Julius entered his 40th year, the Republic was still standing, its temples intact, its Senate convening, its magistrates elected according to ancient custom. Yet beneath the ritual and the speeches, power was becoming personal. Julius understood this instinctively. Pompey the Great had returned from the east crowned with victories. He had reorganized entire provinces, subdued kingdoms, and brought enormous wealth into Roman coffers. His soldiers adored him. The people admired him. But the Senate, wary of any man too successful, delayed ratifying his eastern settlements and hesitated to grant land to his veterans. Crassus, wealthier than any Roman alive, felt slighted in different ways. He had financed political careers, influenced tax contracts, and suppressed Spartacus's rebellion. Yet he lacked the singular glory that clung to Pompey's name. Both men possessed immense resources. Both men were frustrated. Julius, newly returned from governing Hispania and freshly decorated with military success of his own, saw opportunity in dissatisfaction. He was deeply in debt. His lavish public games and calculated generosity had secured popularity, but popularity required constant feeding. Creditors pressed him. Rivals whispered that he was reckless. Yet debt, to Julius, was not weakness. It was momentum. It forced him forward. In 60 BCE, rather than choosing sides between Pompey and Crassus, Julius did something more daring. He brought them together. The arrangement was unofficial, private, and profoundly transformative. No law created it. No ceremony formalized it. It was an understanding among three ambitious men that cooperation would secure what competition had denied them. History would later name it the First Triumvirate. But in the moment, it was simply a pact. Pompey would receive land for his veterans and ratification of his eastern settlements. Crassus would gain favorable financial legislation. Julius would secure support for his bid for the consul. Chance of phrase. Elected office in Rome. It was not ideology that united them. It was mutual benefit. And to strengthen the bond further, Julius offered something deeply Roman: family. He arranged for his daughter Julia to marry Pompey. It was a genuine affection, by most accounts, and the marriage softened tensions, between the older general and the rising politician. When Julius stood for consul in 59 BCE, he did so not as a solitary candidate, but as the political center of a powerful alliance. The Senate resisted him from the beginning. His co-consul, Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus, attempted to block legislation through procedural obstruction. Religious omens were declared unfavorable. Meetings were disrupted. Violence simmered in the streets. Rome's political process had grown theatrical, even chaotic. Julius responded not with retreat, but with relentless forward motion. He pushed through agrarian laws redistributing land to Pompey's veterans. He secured ratification of eastern settlements. He advanced measures benefiting Crassus's financial allies. Bibulus, increasingly sidelined, withdrew from public life for much of the year, declaring that he was watching the skies for omens, a traditional method of suspending political activity. Romans later joked that the year was not the consulship of Caesar and Bibulus, but of Julius and Caesar. The joke carried truth. It was during this consulship that Julius revealed a defining trait. He did not merely participate in political struggle, he dominated it through persistence. Yet he also understood that 1 year as consul would not secure lasting power. After his term ended, he required something greater, a command that would provide both military glory and loyal legions. Through the alliance's influence, he secured a proconsular command over Cisalpine Gaul and Illyricum for 5 years, later extended to include Transalpine Gaul. It was a vast territory north of Italy, restless and fragmented, inhabited by tribes whose relationships with Rome ranged from uneasy alliance to open hostility. To many senators, it seemed a peripheral assignment. To Julius, it was destiny. In 58 BCE, he departed Rome for Gaul. The lands beyond the Alps were not yet the unified province they would become. They were a mosaic of tribes: the Helvetii, the Belgae, the Aedui, the Arverni, each with its own rivalries and ambitions. Movements of peoples threatened Roman interests. Alliances shifted quickly. When the Helvetii attempted a large-scale migration that would pass through Roman-controlled territory, Julius intervened. He framed his actions as defensive, protecting allied tribes and Roman borders. Yet from the first campaign, it was clear he sought more than defense. His Commentari de Bello Gallico, written in spare, controlled prose, would later shape how Rome understood these wars. He wrote in the third person, presenting himself as calm, rational, almost detached. But behind the language lay strategic brilliance. He moved swiftly, built fortifications with astonishing speed, and engaged in battles that tested both discipline and adaptability. At Bibracte, he defeated the migrating Helvetii. Soon after, he confronted Ariovistus, a Germanic king who had crossed the Rhine. Each victory expanded his reputation. The Roman legions under his command, hardened, professional, intensely loyal, began to see in him not just a magistrate, but a leader worth following beyond legal obligation. Gaul was not conquered in a single campaign. It unfolded over years. Rebellions flared. Tribes united temporarily against him. Terrain shifted from dense forests to wide plains. Winters were harsh. Supply lines stretched thin. And yet, Julius persisted. He built bridges across the Rhine to demonstrate Rome's reach into Germanic territory. Even if only briefly, he launched expeditions to Britain, not to conquer permanently, but to signal power. These were symbolic gestures as much as military operations. They expanded his legend. Meanwhile, back in Rome, the political equilibrium began to fray. The alliance between Pompey, Crassus, and Julius required constant reinforcement. In 56 BCE, they met at Lucca to renew their arrangement. Pompey and Crassus would stand for consul again. Julius's command in Gaul would be extended. For a time, the balance held, but fate intervened. In 54 BCE, Julia, Julius's daughter and Pompey's wife, died in childbirth. Her death severed the emotional bond between the two men. What had once been reinforced by family affection now rested solely on political calculation. Then, in 53 BCE, Crassus sought military glory to rival Pompey and Julius. He launched a campaign against the Parthian Empire in the east. At the Battle of Carrhae, disaster struck. Crassus was defeated and killed. His army was shattered. With Crassus gone, the Triumvirate ceased to exist in meaningful form. Two powerful men remained, and Rome grew anxious. Pompey, increasingly aligned with conservative senatorial interests, remained in the city. Julius remained in Gaul, commanding battle-hardened legions who had fought beside him for nearly a decade. The distance between them was more than geographic. In Gaul, resistance reached its fiercest form in 52 BCE under Vercingetorix, a charismatic Arvernian leader who unified many tribes against Roman domination. He adopted a strategy of scorched earth, denying Julius supplies and forcing difficult engagements. The climax came at Alesia. There, Julius found himself in a position that would define his military genius. He besieged Vercingetorix inside a fortified hilltop settlement, constructing elaborate siege works. But a massive Gallic relief army approached from outside. Julius responded by building not one, but two lines of fortifications, one facing inward to contain the city, and one facing outward to repel the relief force. It was engineering on a breathtaking scale. For days, assaults battered Roman lines from both directions. Hunger, exhaustion, and tension pressed upon the legions, yet discipline held. When the final Gallic assault failed and Vercingetorix surrendered, Gaul was effectively subdued. The conquest brought enormous wealth, prestige, and loyalty to Julius. He had transformed Rome's northern frontier and expanded its territory dramatically. But with success came fear. In Rome, senators worried that Julius's growing power threatened the Republic. Pompey, now sole consul for a time, passed laws requiring candidates for consulship to be physically present in Rome. Julius, whose command in Gaul shielded him from prosecution by political enemies, faced a dilemma: relinquish his army and return vulnerable, or defy the Senate. Years of rivalry, pride, and mistrust condensed into a single question: would Julius obey, or would he resist? The Republic, which had survived kings, invasions, and internal unrest, now balanced on personal decisions. Winter descended upon northern Italy in early 49 BCE. Julius stood near a small river marking the boundary between his province and Italy proper, the Rubicon. Roman law forbade a general from crossing into Italy with an army. To do so was rebellion. For days, tension thickened. He knew what crossing meant: civil war. He also knew what surrender meant: likely political destruction. In the quiet of that winter night, beneath cold stars and the breath of waiting soldiers, Julius made his choice. The Republic would not fall with thunder, it would fall with footsteps on a riverbank. And history, patient as ever, leaned forward. the Rubicon was not a grand river. It did not roar like the Nile, nor stretch wide like the Danube. It was modest, narrow, winding quietly through the northern edge of Italy. A traveller might have crossed it without ceremony, scarcely pausing to notice that he had stepped from one territory into another. Yet in the winter of 49 BCE, this small river held the weight of centuries. Roman law was clear. A general entrusted with imperium, the legal power to command troops, must lay down that authority before entering Italy proper. The army belonged to the Republic, not to the man who led it. To cross the boundary under arms was to declare oneself an enemy of the state. For months, negotiations between Julius and the Senate had deteriorated. He had offered compromise. Both he and Pompey would relinquish their commands simultaneously. The proposal would restore balance, remove fear, and preserve peace. The Senate refused. Pompey, once his ally and son-in-law, now stood as Rome's defender against him. Or so the Senate believed. Pompey had been granted extraordinary authority to protect the Republic. Legions were being raised. Speeches filled the Curia with warnings of tyranny. Yet many of Pompey's troops were newly levied, untested. Julius's legions were veterans of Gaul, hardened by nearly a decade of relentless campaigning. Julius stood on the northern bank of the Rubicon, with the 13th Legion at his back. Winter air pressed cold against armour. The sky above was pale and silent. Ancient sources describe him hesitating. It was not fear in the simple sense. It was calculation. The understanding that once the river was crossed, there would be no lawful return. He would be transformed from proconsul to rebel, from magistrate to insurgent. He is said to have uttered the phrase, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. Whether the words were spoken exactly as recorded, the meaning is clear. He stepped forward. The legion followed. With that crossing, the Republic entered its final civil war. News of Julius's advance travelled swiftly. Panic spread through Rome. Pompey and many senators abandoned the city rather than attempt immediate defence. They withdrew south, intending to regroup in Greece, where Pompey's eastern connections promised stronger support. Julius did not rush blindly. His strategy was deliberate. He moved quickly to secure Italy with minimal bloodshed. Cities opened their gates. Many magistrates defected. The speed of his advance created the illusion of inevitability. Psychology mattered as much as force. Within weeks, Rome lay in his control, not through sack or massacre, but through absence. The Senate had fled. The treasury was seized. The machinery of state remained, but its guardians were scattered. Still, the war was far from over. Pompey commanded significant forces in the east. Naval strength favoured him. Influential senators rallied to his cause. The conflict would not be decided in Italy alone. Julius turned first to Spain, where Pompeian legions were stationed. "I go to fight an army without a leader," he reportedly said, "so that later I may fight a leader without an army." The Spanish campaign was swift and efficient. Through maneuver rather than annihilation, he neutralized opposition and secured the western provinces. He displayed a consistent pattern. Clemency. Captured enemies were often pardoned. Former opponents were reinstated. This policy was not purely merciful. It was strategic. By sparing rivals, he undermined their willingness to resist to the death. He cultivated an image of magnanimity, contrasting himself with the proscriptions of Sulla decades earlier. By early 48 BCE, the stage was set for the decisive confrontation. Julius crossed the Adriatic into Greece with limited forces, hoping to surprise Pompey before his full army assembled. But Pompey avoided immediate battle, relying on superior numbers and control of the sea to starve Julius into submission. Supply shortages plagued Julius's troops. Hunger tightened discipline into grim endurance. Skirmishes flared near Dyrrhachium, where Pompey achieved a tactical advantage, nearly breaking Caesar's lines. For a moment, the war trembled. Yet Pompey hesitated to press his advantage decisively. Whether from caution, overconfidence, or political pressure from senators urging confrontation, he allowed Julius to withdraw and regroup. The final clash came on the plains of Pharsalus in Thessaly. Pompey commanded a larger force, perhaps nearly double in infantry, with significantly stronger cavalry. Julius arranged his lines carefully, anticipating Pompey's strategy. Knowing that Pompey would attempt to overwhelm his right flank with cavalry, Julius concealed a reserve line of infantry behind his own horsemen. The morning of battle dawned heavy with expectation. Two Roman armies faced each other, men who shared language, training, even family ties. Civil war carries a particular tragedy. Victory tastes of ashes. When the cavalry charge came, Julius's hidden reserves struck upward with pila and short swords, disrupting the mounted assault. Pompey's cavalry broke. His infantry, deprived of protection on the flank, faltered under pressure. The line collapsed. Pompey fled the field. The once great general who had reshaped the East now retreated toward Egypt, seeking refuge with young King Ptolemy XIII. Julius did not pursue recklessly. He consolidated, secured Greece, and then followed. When Pompey landed in Egypt, he believed he might rebuild influence. Instead, Ptolemy's advisors, seeking favor with Julius, murdered him upon arrival. His severed head was presented to Caesar as a gift. The gesture horrified rather than pleased him. Whatever rivalry had existed, Pompey had been a Roman consul, a former ally, and once his son-in-law. His death marked not triumph but transformation. The old political world was dissolving. Egypt soon became another theatre of conflict. Julius found himself entangled in the dynastic struggle between Ptolemy XIII and his sister Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra's entrance into his life has been romanticized through centuries. Ancient accounts describe her being smuggled into his quarters, wrapped in a carpet or bedding sack, emerging with calculated grace. Whether embellished or not, their alliance was immediate and consequential. Julius supported Cleopatra's claim to the throne. War broke out in Alexandria. Street fighting raged. The Great Library suffered damage during the conflict, though the extent remains debated by historians. Ultimately, Julius prevailed. Ptolemy XIII drowned during the fighting. Cleopatra was restored to power, now allied closely with Rome's dominant figure. Their relationship was political, personal, and symbolic. Cleopatra bore him a son, Ptolemy XV Philopator Philometor Caesar, known later as Caesarion. Yet even as he lingered in Egypt, further resistance flared elsewhere. In Pontus, Pharnaces II challenged Roman authority. Julius responded with astonishing speed, defeating him at the Battle of Zela in 47 BCE. His report to the Senate was famously concise. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. By 46 BCE, he returned to Rome as undisputed master of the Roman world. Triumphs were celebrated, 4 in total, honoring victories in Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, and Africa. Spoils filled the streets, captives marched in chains. Spectacle dazzled the populace, but beneath celebration, unease grew. He was appointed dictator for 10 years, then dictator perpetuo, dictator in perpetuity. The title carried deep historical resonance. Dictatorship in Rome had traditionally been temporary, invoked during crisis and relinquished quickly. Permanence unsettled the old order. Statues were erected, honors multiplied. His image appeared on coinage, unprecedented for a living Roman. He reformed the calendar, introducing the Julian calendar, aligning civil time more accurately with the solar year. He reorganized provincial governance, expanded the Senate's membership, initiated public works, and extended citizenship more broadly. These were substantial reforms. Administrative clarity replaced chaos in many areas. Debt was partially addressed. Veterans were settled in colonies, yet power had concentrated irrevocably. Some senators saw benevolent leadership. Others saw monarchy reborn in everything but name. Rumors circulated that he desired kingship. During the festival of Lupercalia in 44 BCE, Mark Antony publicly offered him a diadem. Julius refused, once, twice, before the crowd. The refusal appeared theatrical, carefully staged. Whether he desired the title openly or merely tolerated its symbolism, suspicion intensified. Among the discontented were many had pardoned. Marcus Junius. Brutus, descended from the Brutus who had expelled Rome's last king centuries earlier, wrestled with conflicting loyalties. Gaius Cassius Longinus harbored resentment. Around them gathered others who feared the end of the Republic. They did not see themselves as assassins. They saw themselves as liberators. In quiet rooms, beneath statues of ancient heroes, they plotted. Julius, meanwhile, prepared for a grand campaign against Parthia, perhaps seeking to eclipse Crassus's failure and Alexander's legacy. He reorganized administration, planned expeditions, moved with the calm confidence of one who believes destiny favors him. On the morning of March 15th, 44 BCE, the Ides of March, he made his way to a meeting of the Senate in the theatre of Pompey. Warnings had reached him. Soothsayers spoke cryptic cautions. His wife Calpurnia reportedly dreamed of his statue running with blood. Friends urged delay, yet he went. The Senate gathered around him under pretense of petition. Then blades flashed. 23 wounds were inflicted. Ancient sources differ on his final words. Some record silence. Others attribute to him a Greek phrase addressed to Brutus. The truth dissolves into legend. He fell at the base of Pompey's statue. The Republic, the conspirators believed, had been saved. But Rome did not exhale in relief. Instead, it descended once more into chaos. Civil war would return, fiercer, bloodier, culminating not in restored senatorial rule, but in the rise of his adopted heir, Octavian, who would become Augustus, Rome's first emperor. The Republic had not been preserved by Caesar's death. It had been irreversibly transformed by his life. And as night settles again over Rome, marble cooling beneath fading light, the small river far to the north continues its quiet flow. Indifferent to memory, the Rubicon remains modest, unchanged, yet its crossing echoes still. On the morning of the Ides of March, Rome did not know it was waking into legend. The air carried the ordinary sounds of the city, merchants opening shutters, sandals scraping across stone, distant voices rising in argument and laughter. The theatre of Pompey stood as it had for years, its columns pale beneath the spring light, its porticos sheltering the movement of senators arriving for session. Julius moved through that morning with the composure that had defined so much of his public life. He had ignored warnings before. He had outlived rivals more powerful than the men who now smiled tightly in his presence. Plots were not unusual in Roman politics. Threats were constant companions of authority. He had survived civil war. He had stood victorious at Pharsalus, at Thapsus, at Munda. He had reshaped the calendar itself, bent administration to his will, forgiven enemies who once marched against him. Perhaps danger had begun to feel theoretical. Calpurnia had urged him to remain home. She dreamed of his statue flowing with blood, of Romans washing their hands in it, as if in ritual. Decimus Brutus, one of the conspirators and a trusted ally, persuaded him otherwise. The Senate, he argued, awaited him. To dismiss the session would appear fearful. Fear was not a posture Julius adopted easily. He entered the theatre of Pompey without armour. He dismissed his guards. The Senate chamber was crowded, the air close, the marble floor cool beneath sandals. Men gathered around him, presenting petitions, pressing inward. The first blade struck from behind. There is something uniquely intimate about assassination in close quarters. It requires proximity. It requires breath shared between attacker and victim. It demands that eyes meet before steel enters flesh. They stabbed him repeatedly, 23 times, according to ancient accounts. Some blows were shallow, glancing. Others penetrated deeply. Blood stained his toga. The senators who did not participate recoiled in shock. The conspirators shouted that they were liberators, that tyranny had ended. Julius fell near the statue of Pompey. It was an irony thick with symbolism. The man who had defeated Pompey now lay beneath his marble likeness. When it was over, there was no thunder, no divine proclamation, only heavy breathing and the metallic scent of blood. The conspirators expected applause. Instead, there was silence. Rome did not erupt in immediate celebration. It did not rally instantly behind the assassins. The city paused, stunned, uncertain. For years, Julius had been the axis around which politics revolved. His death created not clarity, but vacuum. Marcus Antonius, Mark Antony, had narrowly escaped the attack. Warned or delayed outside the chamber, he now moved cautiously. Though publicly aligned with Julius, he quickly assessed the shifting terrain. Survival demanded adaptability. The conspirators, led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, attempted to frame their act as a restoration of liberty. They carried daggers through the streets, proclaiming the end of dictatorship. Yet the Roman populace, long accustomed to spectacle and leadership, did not respond with coordinated enthusiasm. Many remembered the chaos of Sulla's prescriptions. They remembered civil war's hunger and fear. Stability, even under a dominant figure, had become preferable to uncertainty. Julius's body lay unattended for hours. Eventually, 3 slaves placed him upon a litter and carried him home. The wounds were examined. Only one, it was said, was fatal, a puncture to the chest. As night descended, tension thickened. The Senate convened hastily. Compromise emerged, an amnesty for the conspirators, and ratification of Julius's acts. It was a fragile attempt to prevent immediate war. Brutus and Cassius believed they had acted for the Republic. Antony believed opportunity had opened. Julius had left a will. When it was read publicly days later, its contents reshaped sentiment. He had adopted his grandnephew, Gaius Octavius, naming him primary heir. He left substantial sums of money to each Roman citizen. He bequeathed his gardens along the Tiber for public use. The gesture was calculated, generosity extended beyond death. Then came the funeral. It was not quiet. Antony delivered the oration. Ancient sources preserve variations, but its impact is undisputed. He displayed Julius's blood-stained toga. He recounted his victories, his clemency, his gifts to the people. He did not openly condemn the conspirators. He allowed the crowd to reach its own fury, and fury came. The Roman populace surged with grief and anger. The body was burned not on a prepared pyre in the forum, but spontaneously. Furniture and market stalls torn apart to feed the flames. The conspirators' houses were threatened. Brutus and Cassius fled the city. The men who believed they'd saved the Republic now ran from it. Power rarely rests in ideals alone. It settles where force and loyalty converge. In the weeks that followed, a new figure entered Rome quietly. Gaius Octavius, 18 years old, studious, physically unimposing. He had been studying in Illyricum when news reached him. Now he arrived to claim his inheritance. He took the name Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. The name itself was weapon enough. Many underestimated him. Antony did not initially perceive him as a rival. The Senate hoped to use the young heir as a counterbalance to Antony's influence. Octavian moved carefully, aligning himself publicly with his adoptive father's memory while building private alliances. Veterans of Julius's legions faced a choice: loyalty to the seasoned General Antony or to the legal heir bearing Caesar's name. The Republic fractured further. By 43 BCE, tensions escalated into open conflict between Antony and forces aligned with the Senate and Octavian. The battles of Mutina left Antony temporarily weakened but not destroyed. Politics shifted again. Octavian, pragmatic beyond his years, chose negotiation over annihilation. He and Antony met with Marcus Aemilius Lepidus on an island in the river near Bononia. There, in a scene echoing the earlier alliance of Julius, Pompey, and Crassus, they formed the Second Triumvirate, officially sanctioned by law. This was no informal pact. It granted them near absolute power for 5 years to restore the Republic. Restoration began with proscriptions. Lists were posted. Names condemned, wealth confiscated, enemies executed. Cicero, the famed orator and critic of Antony, was among the victims. His head and hands were displayed in the forum. The Republic, in whose name Julius had been killed, now drowned in blood once more. Brutus and Cassius gathered forces in the east. In 42 BCE, at the twin battles of Philippi and Macedonia, they confronted the Triumvir's armies. The fighting was brutal and confused. Cassius, believing defeat inevitable, took his own life prematurely. Weeks later, after renewed engagement, Brutus did the same. With their deaths, the last major defenders of the senatorial cause vanished. Julius's assassins had not restored the Republic. They had ensured its transformation. The Roman world now belonged to 3 men, yet power shared uneasily seldom endures. Tensions grew between Antony and Octavian. Lepidus, the least forceful, was gradually sidelined. Antony governed the east, where his alliance and later romance with Cleopatra deepened. Octavian consolidated control in the west, presenting himself as guardian of Roman tradition against perceived Eastern decadence. The memory of Julius hovered over every maneuver. Antony, styled himself as avenger and loyal lieutenant of Caesar. Octavian presented himself as Caesar's true son. In 31 BCE, their rivalry culminated at the naval battle of Actium off the coast of Greece. Octavian's admiral, Agrippa, secured decisive victory. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, where both would ultimately take their own lives as Octavian closed in. In 27 BCE, Octavian formally restored power to the Senate, who promptly granted him the title Augustus. The Republic's forms remained. Consuls were elected, the Senate convened, laws were passed, but authority rested in one man. The age of emperors had begun, and at its root lay a crossing of a modest river, a lifetime of ambition, a knife's flash in a Senate chamber. Julius did not live to see the empire his actions made possible. He did not sit upon a throne crowned with the title Augustus, yet his shadow stretched across it. He had broken the Republic's balance, whether intentionally or inevitably, and in doing so, reshaped the Mediterranean world. As night settles once more over Rome, centuries later, marble statues weathered and renamed, the Forum reduced to ruins beneath open sky, his name endures. July still marks the calendar. His commentaries remain studied, his ambition debated, his death dramatized. History does not sleep. But tonight, as we drift through its echoes, the story of Julius, boy of a fading aristocracy, general of Gaul, conqueror at Pharsalus, dictator in perpetuity, rests at last. Long after the shouting had faded from the Forum, long after the ashes of the funeral pyre had cooled and scattered into the Roman wind, the question remained, not shouted now, but whispered through generations. Who was Julius, truly? It is easy to describe his battles. It is straightforward to trace his offices, his alliances, his crossings and conquests. Dates can be arranged, campaigns can be mapped, political maneuvers can be analysed like pieces on a board. But a life that bends history cannot be measured by events alone. There is a stillness beneath action, a temperament beneath ambition, a rhythm beneath decision. To understand Julius is not merely to recount what he did, but to consider how he moved through the world. He possessed, by nearly all ancient accounts, a remarkable composure. Even those who opposed him acknowledged it. In moments of crisis, he did not rush into visible panic. He absorbed information quickly. He spoke deliberately. His letters and commentaries reveal a controlled clarity. Spare, almost restrained. He rarely boasted directly, though his prose allowed readers to witness triumph through description. He wrote of himself in the third person, as if observing rather than asserting. Caesar did this. Caesar advanced. The tone was measured, neutral, deceptively simple, yet beneath that restraint lay immense self-belief. From youth, he compared himself not to ordinary magistrates, but to Alexander. He wept, it was said, at the realization that he had not yet achieved similar greatness by the same age. Whether apocryphal or accurate, the story reveals a psychological truth. He did not see his path as confined to tradition, and yet he did not reject tradition outright. This is one of the quiet paradoxes of his character. He respected Roman forms, even as he bent them. He held offices legally. He sought votes. He addressed the Senate. He pardoned enemies publicly. He did not declare himself king. When offered a diadem at the Lupercalia festival, he refused it before the crowd. Some interpret this refusal as sincerity, others as calculation. the truth may lie somewhere between. Roman hatred of monarchy ran deep. The expulsion of the last king, Tarquinius Superbus, remained foundational to Roman identity. To accept a crown would have been to ignite immediate rebellion. Julius understood symbolism intimately. He allowed honours to accumulate gradually. Statues among the gods, a golden chair in the Senate, his image stamped upon coinage, unprecedented for a living Roman. The line between honour and divinity blurred slowly. Was this arrogance, or was it inevitability born of circumstance? By the time he became dictator perpetuo, the Republic had already fractured under the weight of expansion and personal armies. Marius had marched on Rome. Sulla had seized power. Pompey had commanded extraordinary authority. The system had been strained repeatedly before Julius crossed the Rubicon. He did not invent instability, but he mastered it. There is something else that distinguished him. Clemency. Clementia Caesaris, Caesar's mercy, became a political philosophy. After Pharsalus, he pardoned many who had fought against him. After Thapsus and Munda, he spared surviving senators. Even Brutus and Cassius had once benefited from his forgiveness before turning against him. This policy was not naive kindness, it was strategic mercy. By showing restraint, he positioned himself as magnanimous conqueror rather than vindictive tyrant. Yet clemency carries risk. Forgiven men retain pride. Gratitude does not always extinguish ideology. Some of those he spared would later wield daggers. His private life, too, reveals layers. He married 3 times. Cornelia, his first wife. He refused divorce under Sulla's threat. Pompeia, his second, became entangled in scandal during the Bona Dea festival. Though her guilt was unclear, he divorced her with the famous remark that Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. Calpurnia, his final wife, remained with him until his death. And then there was Cleopatra. Their relationship transcended romance alone. It was alliance, spectacle, cultural collision. Cleopatra was intelligent, multilingual, politically astute. Egypt was wealthy, strategically vital. Their connection produced a child, Caesarion, though Rome never formally acknowledged him as legitimate heir. Cleopatra visited Rome and resided in one of Julius's villas across the Tiber. Her presence stirred discomfort among traditionalists. An Eastern queen, openly associated with a dictator, symbolized for some the erosion of Roman austerity. And yet, Julius seemed untroubled by perception. He lived with a sense of forward motion. He reformed the calendar because the old one drifted from astronomical reality. The Julian calendar would endure for more than 16 centuries, a quiet testament to administrative foresight. He expanded the Senate, integrating elites from provincial regions. Critics saw dilution of aristocratic purity. Supporters saw integration of empire. He initiated public works, roads, forums, colonization programs for veterans and urban poor. He reduced certain debts without erasing them entirely, balancing relief with fiscal caution. His reforms were not chaotic decrees. They were structured, systematic. This is perhaps what unsettled his opponents most. He was not erratic. He was organized. A chaotic tyrant is easier to overthrow. A competent one redefines the system before resistance coheres. Did he seek to be king? Ancient sources disagree. Some portray ambition without limit. Others suggest he understood the impossibility of overt monarchy in Rome and sought instead a new constitutional equilibrium centered on himself. He accepted the title Dictator Perpetuo. He allowed his birthday to be celebrated as a public festival. He tolerated near-divine honors, but he refused the diadem. Was that refusal theatrical humility or recognition of timing? Perhaps he believed his authority secure enough without the title. Perhaps he intended gradual transition. Perhaps he assumed time was abundant. History rarely grants such luxury. There is also the matter of his health. Ancient writers note episodes that may have been seizures, what we might now interpret as epilepsy. Whether severe or mild, they did not prevent campaign endurance nor administrative focus, but they remind us that even men who alter empires inhabit fragile bodies. He was slender, reportedly self-conscious about thinning hair, often wearing a laurel wreath that conveniently obscured it. He preferred tunics with slightly longer sleeves than was traditional. Small vanities coexist with grand ambition. He enjoyed literature, rhetoric, wit. He cultivated friendships. He inspired intense loyalty among soldiers, not merely through victory, but through shared hardship. He marched with them. He endured cold and hunger alongside them. This shared endurance built something deeper than command. It built devotion. When he crossed the Rubicon, the 13th Legion did not hesitate. When he faced starvation in Greece, they did not desert. When he returned to Rome triumphant, veterans lined the streets, not merely in obedience, but in pride. Yet devotion from soldiers does not always translate into comfort among senators. The Roman aristocracy valued shared governance, or at least the illusion of it. Julius's efficiency, his dominance of debate, his refusal to defer, unsettled them. He often remained seated while senators approached, a breach of traditional courtesy that signaled hierarchy. Subtle gestures matter in politics. In the end, perhaps his greatest miscalculation was not ambition, but perception. He believed clemency disarmed resentment. He believed reform justified authority. He believed, perhaps, that Rome would accept transformation if it brought stability. He underestimated the symbolic power of tradition. On the Ides of March, when blades descended, it was not only a man they struck, but an argument. The argument that concentrated authority could coexist with Roman liberty. Yet history judged differently than his assassins intended. The republic they sought to restore dissolved within years. The empire that followed bore his name. Caesars would rule for centuries: Augustus, Tiberius, Nero, Trajan, Hadrian, each inheriting not merely territory, but a title derived from his. Even far beyond Rome, the name endured: Kaiser in Germany, Tsar in Russia, echoes across languages. And so, as we step back from the noise of battle and the shock of assassination, we see him not only as general or dictator, but as catalyst. He did not live to wear a crown, but he lived to make crowns possible in Rome again. Night deepens. The marble of the Forum lies broken now in our own time, columns standing like ribs beneath open sky. Tourists walk where senators once whispered. The Rubicon still flows, modest and indifferent. Julius has been debated for more than 2 millennia. Tyrant, reformer, visionary, destroyer. Perhaps he was all of these. Perhaps he was simply a man who saw the structure of his world weakening and chose not to preserve it, but to reshape it, knowing that reshaping would demand risk. In the quiet after legend, we are left not with certainty, but with scale. One life, one river, one chamber of knives, and an empire rising from the space he left behind. In the days before the Ides of March, Rome felt restless, not restless in the way of riot or famine. The markets still opened, magistrates still wore their bordered togas, the forum still filled each morning with petitions and gossip. Yet beneath the routine, something quieter moved. An undercurrent of unease that had no clear shape. Julius had recently been declared dictator perpetuo. The title lingered in conversation like a word not fully understood. Dictator. Romans knew the office well enough. It had existed for centuries, invoked during crisis, limited in duration. 6 months. Absolute authority, yes, but temporary. Perpetuo changed everything. Permanent authority, even if clothed in republican language, strained the imagination of a city that had defined itself for generations by its rejection of kings. In the Senate chamber, men who had once debated tax policy and provincial appointments now found themselves measure in silence. Who spoke freely? Who nodded too quickly? Who avoided certain names? Statues of Julius had been erected among those of Rome's ancient rulers. A golden chair stood for him in the Senate. His likeness appeared on coinage. A quiet but revolutionary shift. For the first time, the face of a living Roman gazed outward from silver and gold. Symbolism accumulates before it ignites. Some senators resented him for personal reasons. Lost prestige, overshadowed influence. Others feared structural collapse. Still others convinced themselves that assassination was not murder, but surgery, a necessary incision to remove disease. Among them was Brutus. He had been pardoned by Julius after Pharsalus. He had benefited from clemency. He had been entrusted with offices and honor. Yet, he carried within him both philosophical conviction and ancestral weight. His ancestor, Lucius Junius Brutus, had expelled Rome's final king nearly 5 centuries earlier. To strike against tyranny was not merely political. It's unwind, historical. Cassius, more openly resentful, supplied sharper urgency. He saw in Julius's concentration of power the end of aristocratic equality. Around them gathered others: Trebonius, Decimus Brutus, Casca, men bound not always by affection for one another, but by shared fear. They met quietly, in homes, beneath colonnades, in corners of the forum, where voices could blend into ambient noise. The plan formed gradually, as such plans do. Timing was debated, location considered, risk measured. They would strike during a Senate meeting, not in darkness, not in secrecy, but in public. It was theatre as much as action, a performance of liberation. Meanwhile, Julius moved through these days with outward calm. He prepared for an upcoming campaign against Parthia, intending to depart within weeks. The campaign promised glory, perhaps revenge for Crassus's earlier defeat at Carrhae. It would extend Roman reach eastward once more. There is a peculiar stillness that sometimes precedes irreversible events. Ordinary tasks feel suspended in invisible tension. On the night before the Ides, Calpurnia dreamed. Ancient writers describe her seeing his statue running with blood, Romans bathing their hands in it, as though in ritual celebration. Dreams carried weight in Roman culture. Omens, auguries, portents. These were not dismissed lightly. She pleaded with him not to attend the Senate meeting scheduled for the following day. Julius reportedly wavered. It is important to pause here, not to dramatize, but to recognize humanity. He was not an abstract force of history at that moment. He was a husband listening to fear in a familiar voice. There were other warnings. A soothsayer had earlier cautioned him to beware the Ides of March. A letter was reportedly pressed into his hand on the way to the Senate. A note detailing the conspiracy. He did not read it before entering. And yet, hesitation in power carries its own danger. To cancel the Senate meeting might signal weakness. To remain home might suggest fear. Authority, once absolute, must appear unshaken. On the morning of March 15th, 44 BCE, he rose. The sky over Rome was pale. Early light touched the temples and rooftops. He dressed in his toga, arranged carefully. The laurel wreath rested upon his head, concealing thinning hair as it so often did. He declined the suggestion of armed escort. Decimus Brutus arrived, urging him not to disappoint the Senate by absence. Persuasion overcame caution. He left his house. As he moved through the streets, citizens greeted him, some with genuine admiration, some with routine politeness, none yet aware that they were witnessing his final walk. The Senate that day met not in the traditional curia, which was under reconstruction, but in the theatre of Pompey, a complex that included a Senate chamber. Pompey's statue stood prominently within. There is a quiet irony in architecture. The rival whose defeat had elevated Julius now watched, in marble silence, as the final act unfolded beneath his likeness. The conspirators arrived separately. They carried daggers concealed within folds of fabric. Their faces, by most accounts, betrayed little. The meeting began ordinarily. Then Tullius Cimber approached with a petition, a request it seemed, for the recall of his exiled brother. Others gathered around Julius, pressing closer as if in support of the plea. He refused. Hands reached toward his shoulders. Casca struck first, glancing off his neck. Julius reacted instinctively, turning, grasping at the blade. More blows followed. Steel flashed repeatedly. Fabric tore. Blood darkened white cloth. Accounts vary in detail. Some say he struggled. Others say that once he saw Brutus among the attackers, he ceased resistance. The famous line, "Et tu, Brute," appears in later retellings, though ancient sources differ. Suetonius suggests he spoke in Greek. Kai su, teknon, you too, child. Whether spoken or silent, the meaning resonates beyond literal phrasing. 23 wounds marked his body. He collapsed at the base of Pompey's statue. The conspirators raised their blades and declared liberty restored. But liberty did not answer. Instead, there was confusion. Senators fled. Blood pooled across marble. Outside, rumors spread with unnatural speed. Rome did not erupt in celebration. It held its breath. The conspirators had expected immediate acclaim. Instead, doors closed. Citizens retreated indoors. The city's reaction was not unified gratitude, but stunned uncertainty. Julius's body lay exposed for hours before servants carried him home. When Antony learned what had happened, he moved carefully, outwardly conciliatory. The conspirators, too, hesitated. They had eliminated a man, not yet secured a system. That afternoon, as light faded over Rome, the Republic existed in fragile suspension. Its most powerful figure lay dead. Its defenders held daggers. Its future was undefined. And in the quiet that followed the shouting, a realization slowly emerged, though few articulated it clearly. They had removed the keystone, but they had not rebuilt the arch. Night fell over the city. Torches burned outside anxious households. Whispers passed through corridors. Some mourned privately. Others waited to see which direction power would turn. The Ides of March did not end the crisis of the Republic. They revealed it. In the days ahead, funeral flames would rise, speeches would inflame crowds, and alliances would fracture further. The men who believed themselves liberators would flee. The young heir Octavian would step into history's widening space. But on that first night, Rome was simply quiet. A quiet filled not with peace, but with the weight of consequence. The Republic had not died in battle. It had died in a chamber, beneath a statue, in the space between ambition and fear. And as darkness settled over marble and memory alike, the world shifted. Not with thunder, but with absence. The days after the Ides did not move in straight lines. They unfolded unevenly, as though Rome itself were unsure how to proceed. Morning would come, markets would reopen, magistrates would appear in public, yet nothing felt anchored. Conversations began and stopped abruptly. Faces carried questions that no one could answer with confidence. The conspirators had acted swiftly, decisively, believing that once Julius fell, the machinery of the Republic would resume its ancient rhythm. They had rehearsed their justification carefully. Tyranny had been prevented, liberty restored, the Senate freed from domination. But the Republic they imagined returning no longer existed in the form they remembered. For years, power had gathered around individuals rather than institutions. Armies followed generals. Provinces answered to strongmen. Citizens had grown accustomed to decisive leadership, to visible authority embodied in a single figure. Julius had not created this appetite. He had fulfilled it. In the immediate aftermath, Brutus and Cassius moved through the streets flanked by supporters, calling for calm. They declared that no further blood would be shed. There would be no prescriptions, no mass executions. Their daggers had been instruments of necessity, not cruelty. Yet the city did not rally. Many ordinary Romans had benefited from Julius's policies: debt relief measures, colonization opportunities, grain distributions, public entertainments. He had left money in his will to each citizen. He had promised land to veterans. He had spoken directly to the people in ways that bypassed senatorial intermediaries. To them, he was not an abstract threat to constitutional purity. He was a provider. Meanwhile, Mark Antony maneuvered with characteristic instinct. He did not confront the conspirators immediately. He met with them, negotiated amnesty, ensured that Julius's acts would remain valid. On the surface, compromise seemed possible. The Senate ratified decisions to prevent immediate collapse. But beneath these gestures, Antony prepared something more powerful than force. He prepared memory. The funeral would be pivotal. Roman funerals for prominent figures were never merely private grief. They were public theatre. Masks of ancestors were worn. Eulogies celebrated lineage and achievement. The dead were presented not only as individuals, but as embodiments of Roman virtue. When Julius's body was carried into the forum, the air thickened. Crowds gathered, veterans in worn cloaks, labourers, merchants, women clutching children, freedmen who had once been slaves. They pressed forward, not with uniform emotion, but with curiosity and tension. The bier stood in view. Antony rose to speak. Ancient historians record variations of his words, and later dramatists would immortalize the speech in forms both poetic and embellished. But what matters is not precise phrasing, it is effect. Antony did not begin with fury. He began with acknowledgement. He read the will aloud. Each Roman citizen would receive a monetary gift. Julius's gardens along the Tiber were bequeathed for public use. Green space offered to the people in perpetuity. Murmurs rippled outward. Then Antony spoke of victories, of Gaul subdued, of triumphs that had enriched Rome, of clemency shown to enemies who now stood among the living. He displayed the blood-stained toga. The fabric, once white, now dark and stiffened, bore the rents of each wound. As he lifted it, the crowd could see where blades had entered, where hands had struck. 23 tears, each one a visible accusation. Emotion is cumulative. It builds through repetition, through image, through shared sensation. Anger began to surface. The conspirators had hoped to frame the assassination as liberation, but in that moment, under the weight of spectacle and gift, the narrative shifted. This was not liberation, it was betrayal. The crowd surged. What began as mourning transformed into outrage. Voices rose. Cries echoed across the forum. The body was seized from its prepared route to the Campus Martius and instead placed upon an improvised pyre in the very heart of the city. Benches were torn apart. Market stalls dismantled. Wood and furniture fed the flames. The fire climbed high, sparks scattering into the afternoon sky. Some rushed toward the houses of Brutus and Cassius, intent on vengeance. The conspirators, sensing the turn, fled Rome swiftly. They had removed a man. They had ignited a movement. The pyre burned long into evening. Ash rose above marble and temple, drifting over rooftops as though the city itself exhaled grief. In the days that followed, Rome divided not cleanly into factions, but into uncertainty. Antony positioned himself as protector of Caesar's legacy. He secured control of state papers and treasury access. He courted veterans. He reassured elites. And then Octavian arrived. He was young, only 18, slight in build, serious in demeanor. He had been studying abroad when news reached him. He returned not with legions, but with a name. Gaius Julius Caesar, Octavianus. Adoption in Rome was not symbolic alone, it was legal transformation. He was Caesar's son-in-law and title, if not by blood. Many dismissed him initially. Antony reportedly underestimated him. Senators believed he might be manipulated. But Octavian possessed a quiet resolve that mirrored his adoptive father's composure, though expressed differently. Where Julius was charismatic and physically commanding, Octavian was calculating and patient. He did not confront Antony immediately. He gathered loyalty. He approached veterans, reminding them of promises embedded in the will. He positioned himself as rightful heir to Caesar's generosity. He cultivated alliances among those wary of Antony's ambition. The Republic, fragile before the assassination, now trembled more visibly. Brutus and Cassius gathered forces in the eastern provinces, preparing for inevitable conflict. Antony and Octavian maneuvered in Italy, their alliance shifting from rivalry to necessity. In 43 BCE, after escalating tensions and skirmishes, the Senate briefly sided with Octavian against Antony. Battles at Mutina weakened Antony but did not eliminate him. Octavian, sensing the Senate's attempt to sideline him afterward, made a decision that revealed political maturity beyond his years. He marched on Rome. It was not the crossing of the Rubicon, but it carried echo. Legions entered the city not to sack it, but to demand recognition. Octavian was granted the consulship at 19. Shortly thereafter, he reconciled with Antony and Lepidus. On a small island near Bononia, the three met. There, they formed the Second Triumvirate. This time, not an informal alliance, but a legally constituted body with extraordinary powers to reconstitute the state. The phrase carried irony. Reconstitution began with blood. Proscriptions returned, more systematic than Sulla's, more ruthless than Julius's restraint had allowed. Lists were posted publicly, names marked for death, property seized, informants rewarded. Cicero, the eloquent defender of senatorial tradition, fell victim. His execution was personal for Antony, who had been the target of Cicero's fierce speeches. Cicero's head and hands were displayed in the forum, a grim reminder that words could provoke fatal consequences. Rome learned again that when institutions falter, power settles into hands willing to wield it without hesitation. In 42 BCE, the forces of the Triumvirs confronted Brutus and Cassius at Philippi in Macedonia. The battles were brutal, chaotic, fought by Romans against Romans once more. Cassius, misled by false reports of defeat, took his own life. Weeks later, Brutus followed after a final loss. The men who had believed themselves saviors died by their own hands. With them died the last organized defense of the old senatorial republic. But peace did not follow immediately. The triumvirate was unstable. Lepidus faded into political obscurity. Antony governed the East, his alliance with Cleopatra deepening into partnership and shared rule. Octavian consolidated the West, presenting himself as restorer of Roman virtue. The memory of Julius remained central to their legitimacy. Antony invoked loyalty to Caesar's vengeance. Octavian invoked inheritance and continuity. Both used his name as foundation. And so paradoxically, the assassination meant to end Caesar's dominance ensured that his identity would dominate Roman politics for decades. The fire in the Forum had not purified the Republic. It had illuminated its transformation. As years passed, rivalry between Antony and Octavian intensified, culminating at Actium in 31 BCE, a battle that would decide the Mediterranean world. But that outcome lay still ahead. In the immediate aftermath of the Ides, what Rome experienced was not restoration, but acceleration. The pace of change quickened. The old balance of magistrates and senate could no longer contain events. Julius had bent the Republic towards singular authority. His death broke the restraint that might have moderated the transition. And in that break, empire found its opening. Night settled again over Rome, as it always had. The Forum, still scarred by scorch marks from the pyre, stood beneath quiet stars. Ash had been swept away, blood scrubbed from marble, yet memory lingered in stone. Somewhere beyond the city, veterans sharpened blades for future battles. Senators drafted cautious speeches. A young heir studied maps and messages by lamplight. The Republic's last breath had already passed. It simply took years for the world to recognize it. Years passed after the Ides, yet Rome never truly returned to what it had been before the knives flashed in the Senate chamber. The Republic had survived earlier crises, wars, rebellions, dictatorships. But this time, something more permanent had shifted. Power no longer circled the Senate as its center of gravity. It orbited individuals. And now, two men stood beneath the long shadow of Julius. Mark Antony carried himself with visible confidence. A seasoned soldier, broad-shouldered and charismatic, he had fought beside Julius in Gaul and remained loyal through civil war. He understood the loyalty of legions and the theatre of command. After Philippi, Where Brutus and Cassius fell, Antony took control of Rome's eastern territories. Wealthy, cultured, layered with older civilizations that predated Rome itself. Octavian remained in the west. He was still young, still outwardly less imposing. Yet time had begun to harden him. The softness of youth gave way to calculated restraint. He studied men carefully. He listened more than he spoke. And above all, he learned from the life and death of his adoptive father. The Second Triumvirate had been born from necessity, but it was not designed for permanence. Shared supremacy contains seeds of rivalry. Lepidus, the third member, gradually faded into irrelevance, stripped of influence, and sidelined. Without dramatic confrontation, the Mediterranean world narrowed to two masters: Antony in the east, Octavian in the west. Between them lay memory and ambition. In Egypt, Antony's alliance with Cleopatra deepened into something that unsettled Rome profoundly. Cleopatra was no passive queen. She was educated, politically sharp, fluent in multiple languages, and adept at navigating shifting power structures. She had once aligned herself with Julius, and now she bound herself to Antony. Together they projected an image not entirely Roman. Antony adopted aspects of Hellenistic kingship. He distributed eastern territories to Cleopatra and their children in a ceremony known as the Donations of Alexandria. Titles were granted, crowns displayed. The spectacle suggested not republican governance, but dynastic monarchy. To many in Rome, this felt like confirmation of their deepest fears, the erosion of Roman austerity beneath foreign influence. Octavian recognized opportunity. He did not immediately declare war on Antony. Instead, he shaped narrative. Through careful propaganda, he framed the conflict not as civil war between Romans, but as defense of Rome against Eastern corruption. Antony was portrayed not as rival consul, but as a man seduced, weakened, compromised by Cleopatra. The Senate, increasingly aligned with Octavian, absorbed this framing. When war was declared in 32 BCE, it was declared not formally against Antony, but against Cleopatra. Language matters. By casting Cleopatra as the foreign threat, Octavian shielded himself from the stain of initiating another Roman civil war. He presented himself as protector of tradition, guardian of ancestral values. The decisive confrontation came at Actium in 31 BCE. The battle was naval, fought off the western coast of Greece. Antony and Cleopatra commanded a substantial fleet, though plagued by logistical strain and perhaps wavering morale. Octavian's admiral, Marcus Agrippa, proved tactically superior. His maneuvers disrupted Antony's formations and severed supply routes. The engagement unfolded under heavy skies and tense expectation. Ships collided, oars splintered, fire spread across decks, smoke thickened over the Ionian Sea. At a crucial moment, Cleopatra's fleet broke formation and sailed south. Antony followed. To some observers, it appeared as abandonment. To others, strategic withdrawal, but perception would define it. Octavian emerged victorious. Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Egypt, their power collapsing inward. Over the following year, Octavian advanced steadily. In 30 BCE, as Roman forces closed upon Alexandria, Antony fell upon his sword. Cleopatra, facing humiliation and captivity, ended her life soon after. Tradition holds by the bite of an asp, though details remain debated. Egypt became a Roman province, and Octavian stood alone. No triumvirate. No rival general commanding equal legions. No Eastern monarch balancing influence. Only one heir of Julius remained. In 29 BCE, Octavian returned to Rome in triumph. The celebrations were vast, yet he moved cautiously. He had watched Julius rise too high, too visibly. He understood the resentment that accumulates around overt dominance. He would not call himself king. In 27 BCE, he enacted a performance of restoration. Standing before the Senate, he formally offered to relinquish extraordinary powers and return authority to the Republic. The gesture was calculated humility. The Senate, in turn, granted him new titles. Among them, Augustus. The name carried religious undertones, reverence, sanctity, elevation. He retained control of key provinces, command of legions, and tribunician authority. Outwardly, magistracies continued. Consuls were elected. The Senate debated. But real power rested with him. Thus began the Principate. It did not announce itself as monarchy. It did not crown a king in gold. It clothed authority in republican forms while concentrating decision in one man's hands. The Republic had not been destroyed in a single moment. It had been reshaped gradually through Marius's reforms, Sulla's dictatorship, Pompey's commands, Julius's civil war, and finally Octavian's careful consolidation. Julius had broken the old equilibrium. Augustus stabilized the new one, and in doing so, he ensured that the name Caesar would no longer belong solely to a man. It would belong to an office. Future emperors would adopt it as title: Tiberius Caesar, Nero Caesar, Trajan Caesar. The word ceased to describe lineage alone. It became synonymous with supreme authority. Beyond Rome, the name traveled even further. Centuries later, rulers in distant lands would echo it. Kaiser in Germanic tongues, Tsar in Slavic courts. The sound endured long after Latin faded from daily speech. All of it traced back to one family name in a republic struggling with its own scale. Yet for all the transformation, one must return to the quieter question. Did Julius intend this outcome? There is no clear answer. He sought authority, certainly. He pursued glory without apology. He crossed a river, knowing it meant war. He accepted titles that strained tradition. He centralized power to enact reform. But whether he envisioned a hereditary monarchy in Roman form is less certain. He died at 55, in the midst of planning further campaigns. His system remained incomplete. Augustus refined what Julius began, tempering visibility, mastering perception, blending autocracy with ritual deference. If Julius was flame, Augustus was ember, controlled, enduring. And so the Mediterranean entered a new age. The Pax Romana would stretch across decades. Roads would bind provinces together. Law would standardize governance. Trade would flourish. Cities would rise beneath imperial patronage. Peace, of a sort, followed prolonged upheaval. Yet the cost had been transformation. The Senate would never again dominate Rome as it once had. Elections would continue, but within boundaries defined by imperial favor. Legions would swear loyalty to emperors. The Republic lived on in language. The Empire lived in reality. As night falls once more over the ancient world, over marble arches and sea-washed harbors, the shape of history feels less abrupt than inevitable. Institutions evolve. Power adapts. Names linger. Julius did not wear a crown, but his name became one. The small river he crossed still flows in northern Italy, quiet and unremarkable. The Senate chamber where he fell exists now in ruin. The statues that once bore his likeness have weathered into fragments. Yet the calendar still marks July. His commentaries are still read, and the idea of Caesar, ambitious, decisive, transformative, continues to echo through political imagination. The boy who once walked Rome's narrow streets during Sulla's prescriptions could not have known the full arc of consequence awaiting him, but in stepping forward, across riverbanks, across battlefields, across the fragile boundary between tradition and change, he altered the trajectory of the Western world. And as we drift gently towards stillness, we see that history rarely turns in comfort. It turns in courage, in ambition, in fear, in calculation. It turns when a single figure decides not to stand still. Long before Julius was born, long before Pompey marched east or Sulla marched on Rome, the Republic had already begun to stretch beyond the limits of its original design. To understand how one man could alter its course so completely, we must move backward. Away from the blood on the Senate floor, away from the fire in the Forum, and return to a quieter, older Rome. The early Republic had been small. Its citizens were farmers, landholders, men who tilled fields by day and served in the legions when called. Military service was seasonal, campaigns were short. Generals returned to private life after victory. Authority rotated. Power was distributed through magistracies carefully balanced against one another. 2 consuls, elected annually, prevented concentration. The Senate advised, but did not command armies directly. Tribunes protected the interests of the plebeians. Dictators, when appointed, served only briefly before stepping down. It was a system built for a city-state, but Rome did not remain a city-state. Through a succession of wars, against neighbouring tribes, against Carthage in the Punic Wars, against Hellenistic kingdoms in the east, Rome expanded across the Mediterranean. Victory brought territory. Territory required administration. Administration demanded prolonged military command. The old rhythms began to falter. When legions campaigned for years rather than months, soldiers no longer returned promptly to their farms. Small landholders struggled. Wealth from conquered provinces flowed unevenly, enriching elites who acquired vast estates worked by slaves captured in war. The countryside changed. Independent farmers declined. Large estates, latifundia, expanded. Displaced citizens drifted toward Rome itself, swelling the urban population. The Republic's political structure had not been designed for empire. Governors administered provinces, often with minimal oversight. Corruption flourished. Ambitious men saw opportunity, not only in service, but in exploitation. Then came reformers. In the 2nd century BCE, the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, attempted land reforms to address inequality. They sought redistribution of public land to struggling citizens. Their efforts met fierce resistance from senatorial elites. Both brothers died violently. Blood entered Roman politics openly. The idea that political disagreement could end in assassination began not with Julius, but decades earlier. Then came Gaius Marius. He reformed the army, allowing landless citizens to enlist. It was a practical solution to manpower shortages and a profound shift in loyalty. Soldiers who had no property tied their futures to their generals, who promised pay and land upon discharge. Professional armies emerged. Lucius Cornelius Sulla followed, brilliant, ruthless. When denied a command he desired, he did what no Roman general had done before. He marched his legions on Rome itself. It was a breach of sacred boundary. The city was taken by its own army. Sulla declared himself dictator, enacted prescriptions, and executed opponents. Property was confiscated. Lists of the condemned were posted publicly. The Republic survived Sulla's abdication, but precedent had been set. Armies could enforce political will. Generals could override Senate decisions. Violence could redefine legality. By the time Julius entered public life, these precedents were not distant memories. They were living lessons. He had grown up during Sulla's proscriptions. He had fled Rome to avoid execution. He had seen what happened when power concentrated violently. Yet he also observed something else. Sulla had attempted to restore senatorial dominance through reform. He expanded the Senate, curtailed the power of tribunes, reinforced aristocratic control. But once he stepped down, many of his measures eroded. The system resisted rigidity. Meanwhile, Rome's territorial expansion continued. Campaigns in Spain, in Asia Minor, in Gaul demanded extended commands. Triumphs elevated generals into celebrities. Wealth flowed into private coffers. Pompey exemplified this transformation. Granted extraordinary authority to combat piracy across the Mediterranean, he succeeded brilliantly. He reorganized the East with near-monarchical power, yet technically under Republican sanction. The Republic's laws stretched to accommodate necessity. Each extension normalized exception. And so, when Julius formed his alliance with Pompey and Crassus, he did not invent private power sharing. He formalized what ambition already practiced. When he secured prolonged command in Gaul, he followed precedents set by others. When he crossed the Rubicon, he repeated Sulla's act. Though framed within different justification, the Republic did not fall because Julius was uniquely ambitious. It faltered because its structure had not adapted to its scale. Imagine a vessel built for a river now sailing an ocean. Its hull strains. Its sails pull against design. The framework groans beneath expansion. The Mediterranean world of the first century, BCE, was vast. Diverse cultures, languages, economies, religions, all under Roman dominion. Communication was slow, loyalty diffuse, wealth uneven. The Senate remained an aristocratic body rooted in tradition, often resistant to reform. That threatened elite privilege. Popular leaders emerged in response. Men who appealed directly to the masses. Political violence escalated gradually, then openly. Street gangs aligned with rival politicians clashed in Rome. Elections became battlegrounds of bribery and intimidation. Magistracies were pursued not as civic duty alone, but as gateways to wealth and command. By the time Julius became consul, the Republic's surface still gleamed, but its internal balance was fragile. He exploited that fragility, but he did not create it. This perspective does not absolve him, it contextualizes him. When he centralized authority, he did so within a system already accustomed to extraordinary commands. When he assumed dictatorship, he did so in a culture that had invoked dictatorship before. The difference lay in duration, in permanence, in the quiet accumulation of honors that blurred the line between magistrate and monarch. Yet perhaps the most profound transformation was psychological. Romans had once feared kingship as ultimate corruption. But decades of instability had altered fear. Citizens who experienced recurring civil wars, proscriptions, economic strain, and political paralysis began to value stability over purity, order over abstraction. Julius represented decisive order. Augustus refined it into sustainable governance. The Republic had been a brilliant structure for a smaller world. Empire required something else. Whether that something else could have emerged without bloodshed is unknowable. History rarely offers alternate pathways clearly, but the trajectory suggests tension between scale and structure long before the Ides. As we step back from personalities and view the arc more broadly, we see Julius less as solitary architect and more as accelerant. He pushed the system beyond its elastic limit. But the elasticity had been weakening for generations. Night settles differently over this earlier Rome. Fields beyond the city once held independent farmers preparing for seasonal service. The Forum once hosted debates rooted more in policy than survival. Authority rotated predictably. Slowly, that predictability eroded. By the time a young aristocrat named Julius walked those streets, the Republic was already carrying the weight of empire without the framework of one. He sensed possibility in that imbalance. He seized it. And in doing so, he ensured that Rome would not shrink back into its original shape. It would evolve through fire, through ambition, through adaptation. As we drift deeper into reflection, one truth becomes gentle but clear. No single man destroys a system alone, but one man, at the right moment, can redirect it forever. After the wars had ended, after Actium's smoke had cleared, and Augustus settled into the careful architecture of imperial rule, something quieter began to take shape. Julius was no longer a threat. He was no longer a rival. He was no longer even a man in the political sense. He was becoming memory. And memory, in Rome, was powerful. Shortly after his death, the Senate declared him Divus Julius, the divine Julius. A comet had appeared in the sky during funeral games held in his honor. To many Romans, it was not coincidence, but confirmation. The comet became known as the Sidus Julium, the Julian star, interpreted as his soul ascending to the heavens. Octavian, ever perceptive, understood what this meant. If Julius was divine, then he, as adopted son, was Divi Filius, son of a god. It was a subtle transformation. Not king, not tyrant, son of the divine. Temples were erected in Julius's honor. Priests were appointed. His image joined Rome's sacred landscape. Divinity, once reserved for mythic founders and distant gods, now touched recent memory. The Republic had feared kings. It had not feared gods. Augustus wielded this carefully. He did not declare himself divine during his lifetime in Rome, though in the provinces, imperial cults flourished. Instead, he positioned himself as steward of peace, restorer of order, always referencing Julius as predecessor. In this way, Julius became foundation, not cautionary tale, not villain, but origin point. Historians of the early empire wrote with delicate balance. Some, like Livy, focused on Rome's distant virtues, perhaps implying contrast without overt accusation. Others, like Suetonius and Plutarch, generations later, would chronicle Julius's life with fascination, noting ambition, charm, scandal, and genius alike. Even critics could not ignore him. Cicero, who had once feared his dominance, would be remembered partly because of his opposition to him. Brutus and Cassius, who struck him down, would live in moral debate for centuries. Patriots to some, traitors to others. Julius became a mirror. Each generation saw what it needed to see. To emperors, he was validation, proof that singular authority could reshape the world. To republicans, he was warning, evidence of how liberty could erode through gradual concentration of power. To soldiers, he was exemplar of decisive leadership. To writers, he was drama embodied. Centuries passed. The Roman Empire expanded further, then fractured, then transformed again. Christianity rose. The Western Empire fell. The Eastern endured. Yet the name Caesar persisted. In the Germanic lands that once resisted Roman legions, rulers adopted the title Kaiser. In Slavic courts, Tsar echoed the same origin. The syllables shifted through language, but the lineage remained audible. Authority borrowed his name to legitimize itself. Even in lands Rome never governed, Caesar signified supreme rule. In the Middle Ages, chroniclers revisited his campaigns. Renaissance scholars rediscovered his commentaries, admiring the clarity of Latin prose. Military strategists studied his maneuvers at Alesia and Pharsalus. Political theorists debated his crossing of the Rubicon as emblem of decisive commitment. Artists painted his assassination with theatrical intensity. Marble senators frozen mid-strike, cloaks swirling, faces torn between resolve and horror. Playwrights staged his final hours. In one of the most enduring dramatic retellings, a line attributed to him. Tututu. Brute echoed across stages, embedding itself into cultural memory regardless of historical precision. The actual man receded, the symbol advanced, and yet, when we return to the quieter record, to the letters, the administrative reforms, the patient logistics of bridging the Rhine, a more complex figure re-emerges. He was not only conqueror, he was organizer, not only ambitious, but disciplined. He wrote with precision. He calculated supply routes. He forgave strategically. He planned campaigns with long arcs in mind. History often simplifies such figures into archetypes: tyrant, hero, martyr. But Julius resists reduction. He embodied contradiction. He championed popular reforms while consolidating personal power. He respected Roman forms while bending them toward permanence. He displayed mercy, yet unleashed war. He refused a crown, yet accepted perpetual dictatorship. Perhaps that is why he endures so vividly. He represents transition, and transition unsettles certainty. When empires shift, when systems strain, when institutions falter under expansion or inequality, observers often invoke his name. The phrase "crossing the Rubicon" survives in modern language as shorthand for irreversible decision. Few remember the river's modest size. Many remember the step. There is something deeply human in that image. A solitary figure standing at boundary, aware that movement forward erases retreat. It speaks not only to politics, but to personal transformation. And so Julius's legacy extends beyond Rome. He becomes metaphor. Yet beneath metaphor lies mortality. He aged. He worried about hair loss. He suffered possible seizures. He loved, grieved, calculated, doubted. He lived in rooms lit by oil lamps, not electric light. He breathed air heavy with smoke and incense. He walked on stone streets that still exist in fragments beneath Italian soil. He did not know he would become calendar month, imperial title, dramatic icon. He knew only the pressures of his moment. That is perhaps the gentlest way to approach him now. Not as myth towering above marble ruins, but as man navigating structural fracture. The Republic was bending. He chose to push. Augustus chose to stabilize. And the world that followed bore both their fingerprints. As we approach the end of this long journey, the noise of battle fades into something softer. reflection rather than clash. Rome still stands, in pieces and in continuity. The Forum lies open to sky. The theatre of Pompey is gone, its stones repurposed into later buildings. The Rubicon flows quietly, indifferent to the centuries of meaning assigned to its waters. Tourists pass through July unaware that the month carries his name. Students read Veni, Vidi, Vici without smelling battlefield dust. Yet somewhere in the undercurrent of political imagination, the idea of Caesar persists. That decisive individuals can reshape systems, that institutions can be both resilient and fragile. That power, once centralized, rarely diffuses easily again. And so, as night settles gently over memory and stone alike, the story of Julius resolves not in final judgment, but in continuity. He was neither soul destroyer nor flawless visionary. He was catalyst, and catalysts, once introduced, cannot be withdrawn. The republic he inherited could not contain the empire it had built. The empire that followed could not have emerged without the rupture he embodied. The boy who once hid from Sulla's prescriptions became the name emperors claimed for legitimacy. The general who crossed a narrow river altered the course of continents. And in the quiet rhythm of history, slow, relentless, patient, his footsteps still echo. Long after empires settle into dust, long after marble fractures and inscriptions fade beneath wind and rain, what remains is not the clash of steel nor the roar of triumph. What remains is quiet. It is tempting, when telling the story of Julius, to end with spectacle, with the crossing of the Rubicon, with the blaze of the funeral pyre, with the thunder of Actium. History often feels loud at its turning points, but lived experience is rarely loud all the way through. For every battle, there were long marches in silence. For every Senate confrontation, there were hours of waiting in shaded courtyards. For every triumph through the streets of Rome, there were nights spent studying reports by lamplight, calculating grain supply, drafting letters to governors in distant provinces. Julius's life, viewed from afar, appears monumental. Up close, it was made of ordinary hours. He rose in the morning. He read correspondence. He met with advisors. He listened to petitions. He rode through camps, speaking with centurions. He endured winter cold in Gaul and desert heat near Egypt. He worried about loyalty. He calculated risk. Ambition is not constant fire. It is sustained intention. When he stood at the Rubicon, the decision was dramatic. But it had been building for years through negotiation, frustration, calculation. The step across that narrow river was the visible crest of a long internal current. The Republic did not shatter in that instant. It had been cracking gradually, through inequality, through prolonged commands, through personal rivalries that eclipsed institutional restraint. Julius sensed the cracks. He stepped into them, and once stepped, the structure could not return to its prior shape. But what is perhaps most striking, when we step back now across centuries, is how brief his life was compared to the consequences it carried. 55 years, that is all. In those 55 years, he rose from minor aristocrat to dictator of the Mediterranean world. He rewrote the calendar. He conquered Gaul. He reshaped Roman governance. He triggered a sequence of events that culminated in imperial rule lasting centuries. And yet, his own days were finite, vulnerable, uncertain. On the morning of the Ides, He did not wake knowing it would be his last sunrise. The sky over Rome that day was no different in colour than countless others. There is something deeply human in that truth. Great figures, in their own time, do not see the full arc of their impact. They act within pressure and opportunity. They respond to crisis as they understand it. They pursue what feels urgent, necessary, inevitable. Only later does history stretch their choices across continents and centuries. After his death, the world did not freeze in reverence. It moved forward. Wars followed. New rulers emerged. Systems stabilized in altered form. Generations were born who had never seen the Republic as it once functioned. To them, Augustus's principate felt normal. Memory adjusted, and slowly, Julius became story. But story has power of its own. His name traveled beyond Latin-speaking lands. It embedded itself into titles of authority far removed from Rome. It survived the fall of the Western Empire. It echoed through medieval courts, Renaissance scholarship, Enlightenment political theory. Revolutionaries debated him. Monarchs admired him. Republicans warned against him. In classrooms, students still learn the phrase, crossing the Rubicon, without ever seeing the modest Italian river itself. It is a reminder that symbols often outgrow the reality that birthed them. Yet beneath symbol lies something quieter, something that fits gently into the spirit of drift to sleep. Time humbles all structures. The Forum Romanum, once heart of a world empire, now lies open to the sky. Grass grows between stones that once felt the tread of senators and soldiers. The theatre of Pompey has vanished into later construction. The Senate chamber, where blades flashed, exists only in reconstructed imagination. The Rubicon flows, narrow and unremarkable, its banks quiet. Tourists stand where Julius once stood, unaware that the soil beneath their feet has absorbed centuries of memory. Empire feels permanent in its own moment, yet even empire yields to time. What endures is not domination, but influence, the quiet shaping of language, of governance, of imagination. Julius did not see himself as the beginning of emperors. He saw himself as solving immediate problems. He sought to secure authority, to stabilize territory, to elevate Rome's greatness. He did not know that the system he altered would outlive him by centuries. Perhaps there is something restful in that realization. No matter how large the ambition, no matter how fierce the conflict, no individual controls the full future. History is a current wider than any one swimmer. Julius entered it boldly, others carried it forward, and eventually all returned to stillness. As night deepens now, not over ancient Rome, but wherever you are listening, consider how distant those events truly are. The voices that once echoed through marble halls have long since faded. The fires have cooled. The banners have fallen. What remains is narrative, and narrative, told slowly, becomes almost like breath, rising and falling, moving gently through time. The Republic rose from monarchy. It expanded beyond its design. It fractured under strain. One man stepped forward at a critical threshold. Another consolidated the aftermath. Centuries passed, stone weathered, names endured. And here now, in quiet reflection, the story settles. Not in judgment, not in accusation, but in awareness. A boy born into a restless republic became a general, a statesman, a dictator, a catalyst. He was shaped by his era, and in turn shaped it. He crossed a river, and the crossing became legend. He fell beneath knives, and the fall became transformation. History is not only noise, it is also silence between events. And in that silence, we find perspective. The world Julius knew is gone, yet the human impulses within it, ambition, fear, loyalty, hope, remain familiar. Empires change names, rivers keep flowing, time continues. And so, as this long journey through Rome gently comes to rest, lets the marble cool, let the torches dim, let the murmurs fade into distance. The Republic has fallen, the Empire has risen, the centuries have passed, and somewhere in the quiet, the echo of footsteps near a narrow river softens into stillness. Rest now. History will remain, and the river keeps flowing. And that is where we'll gently close tonight's journey. If you're still awake, thank you for spending this time with me. And if you're already drifting somewhere between Rome and sleep, then I hope this story carried you there softly. Before you go, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? It's always amazing to see how far these quiet stories travel. Leave a comment and let me know. If you enjoy slow, immersive history designed to help you rest, consider subscribing to Drift to Sleep. There are many more journeys waiting, across empires, oceans, ancient cities, and forgotten worlds, all told at a pace meant to calm the mind rather than rush it. For now, let the day go. Let the noise fade. And wherever you are, I hope you sleep deeply and wake gently. I'll see you in the next story.